and it's our moment to protect our seniors, their benefits, and their access to quality care. We're going to continue to do this for many years to come to share the great story of the American dream and our senior citizens who embody it. And thank you very much for the opportunity to participate tonight.
Sure. Thank you, Kathy. Now I'd like to yield as much time as she would like to my good friend, neighbor on the east side of Missouri, Tennessee here, Representative Diane Black.
Thank you. Thank you for yielding your time, my dear friend from Missouri. And it's very good to be here today as Republican women and lifting up seniors. When I think about the seniors in my life, my grandmother and my grandfather, I really hope that my children and grandchildren will think the same way about me, because when we ask people who are their heroes, so many times what we hear is we hear about their grandmothers and their grandfathers. And that is because they have so much to offer, especially the greatest generation. The generation that right now we are trying to protect every benefit that we can for them, because they have worked hard and they have put money into the system and they deserve to be cared for. Now, one thing I do know about seniors, having worked with seniors in home health care as a nurse, is that they really feel like many times they don't have choice. And our seniors, just because they turn 65, should not be having their choice taken away. We shouldn't think that they can't make good choices. And that's exactly what the health care bill that was passed by the Democrats last year, the Patient Affordability Act, does, is it removes the ability for them to make choices. In particular, the Independent Payment Advisory Board, also known as IPAB, which is a group of 15 unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats that are assigned by the President. And their job will be to cut the cost and limit access for our seniors to care. They will have the ability to be able to deny care and not give choice to our seniors. This is wrong. Our plan, the Path to Prosperity, would give our seniors choice. It would not affect those 55 or older, but it would give those 54 and younger an opportunity to be able to have choice in their programs. We address the unsustainable growth of Medicare so the program does not bankrupt us in 10 years, so that we can have money in the bank for our seniors as they age. It is only fair and right that our seniors should have choice, and that they should have the care that they put into the bank and they so deserve. Let's give seniors their choice. Thank you. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Diane. Now I'm happy to introduce my good friend from the great state of Alabama, Congresswoman Martha Roby.
Thank you so much for having this special order tonight. It is so important for us to have the opportunity to speak to America, but particularly to hone in to our seniors back home. And of course, throughout my travels back through Alabama during our district work periods, repeatedly hear two things from seniors in Alabama. When is Congress going to pass a budget, and how is Congress, with all of our budget woes, going to preserve Social Security and Medicare? And the failure of Congress to address these concerns in an honest way threatens the economic security of America's seniors. Seniors deserve better than empty promises from a government that is broke. They deserve straightforward, honest answers and real solutions. And I, too, like many of the women that have spoken tonight, I have a grandmother. I call my grandmother Gaga. And I have to look Gaga in the eye as a member of Congress and express to her my sincerity in making sure that we are taking care of our seniors. We all agree that we're facing a serious budget crisis in Washington, and it's been more than 900 days since the Senate has passed a budget. I would like to say this is ridiculous. A budget is a basic financial plan for our country. It is a vision for America's future. Approving a budget is a fundamental task for Congress. What business would operate without a basic budget for 3 years? Republicans in the House have passed a bold budget plan that clearly addresses some of the biggest financial issues that we face. The House Republican budget addresses Washington's reckless spending. It is an honest, detailed, concrete plan to put our budget on a path to balance and our economy on a path to prosperity through job creation. Under the Republican House budget, seniors 55 and older will not be affected in any way. And as I think about my grandmother that I've already talked about, I have to reiterate this point. It is so important. Seniors 55 and those that are 55 and older will not be affected by our Republican plan. They will not be affected. Their benefits will not change. After paying into a system for years, we made a commitment to those seniors, and we must follow through. For those of us who are 55 and under, we must take steps to ensure that Medicare will still be available when we retire and available for our children and our grandchildren. This is common sense. We know that without reform and repairs, these entitlement programs simply will not be in existence for us when we retire. Without reform, they will collapse, and the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office anticipates that Medicare will go bankrupt by 2020. It is clear that these programs are not sustainable in their current form, and actions must be taken before it is too late. What proposals has this administration put forward to address these concerns? None of us in this room have yet to see a solid plan for action. By failing to address the problem, this administration is failing our seniors. Rather than offering solutions, the administration is continually providing our seniors with misleading information regarding the Republican proposal. Let me say it one more time. Those 55 and older under our plan will not be affected as it relates to their benefits. Washington's failure to enact policies that promote long-term economic growth and balance the budget is creating uncertainty for employers and consumers alike. It is time that Washington gets serious and put our fiscal house in order. There are 15, now 16 bills after today waiting in the Senate for action that will put Americans back to work if the Senate will only take that action. Congress must act now. It is what we were sent to Washington to do, and protecting our seniors is a huge part of that. Thank you so much again for hosting this hour tonight and letting me, on behalf of Alabama's 2nd District, be a part of it. Thank you. I yield back.
Absolutely, lady. Thank you. It is important that we get the truth out and that seniors have an opportunity to hear the truth about our bills and the steps that we are taking to try to protect and defend them. Now I get to introduce to you my fellow colleague from the great state of North Carolina, Representative Renee Elmers.
Thank you so much, and thank you for leading this special order tonight. It's so important. And you heard from my fellow women colleagues the discussion we're having about our families, our seniors, Medicare, Social Security, the importance of operating under a budget. Go ahead, lady. Sorry. Thank you. We continue to grapple with these issues because here in the House of Representatives we've passed numerous bills. We've passed the repeal of the President's health care bill, and yet only to go on to the Senate and not be taken up for a vote. You heard my fellow women colleagues discuss how we've passed 15 bills on to the Senate, including the repeal, with no action whatsoever. The American people are calling for jobs. The American people are calling for a change in our economy. And those bills will take care of that issue. Those bills will set us on a path towards recovery, and yet we continuously play politics on the Senate side. We don't bring these things for a vote. We're here tonight talking about all these issues that affect our families. Again, our seniors. Our seniors are so concerned about what's going to happen in the future. Our seniors have paid into a system their entire life, into Social Security and Medicare. They deserve those benefits back. As a nurse, taking care of seniors was part of my core health care life. Taking care of seniors and ensuring that they're going to receive good care throughout the remainder of their life. And they paid into that benefit willingly. They paid into that benefit and deserve to get it back. They don't look at Medicare and Social Security as budgetary issues. They look at these as benefits that they deserve, and it is incumbent upon us to make sure that they receive them. You've heard my fellow women colleagues, again, reiterate over and over again that if you are 55 and older, through our House-passed budget, they will not be affected. Anyone 55 and older, no benefit is changed whatsoever. And yet, in the Senate, that budget is not taken up for a vote. The American people are looking for answers. The American people know the issue. They understand, because we have made the point over and over and over again, that Medicare down the road, just a few years down the road, will be bankrupt because of the situation that we're in today. Seniors are calling my office every day concerned that as Republicans, we are going to ruin Medicare for them and that somehow they're going to lose that benefit. I can tell them, honestly, that is the last thing that any of us as Republicans want to do. In fact, the problem lies with the President's health care bill that was passed in the 111th Congress, because in that bill, $500 billion was taken out of Medicare, and in its place was put into place a 15-person panel, which you've also heard my fellow colleagues discuss, IPAB, Independent Payment Advisory Board. 15 individuals, 15 bureaucrats will be able to decide what Medicare will pay for and what they will not, essentially taking away the patient-doctor relationship. My husband's a surgeon. I don't want my husband to have to sit down with his patients and discuss what they cannot do because Medicare will not pay for it. But that, unfortunately, is the future. If we are not able to remove this, if we are not able to repeal, as we have already passed here in the House. My fellow colleagues are working very hard to rescue Medicare from the position that it's in right now, because it is doomed to failure. But unfortunately, this issue has been kicked down the road through previous administrations, through previous Congresses. But we can no longer allow this to go on. We have to address the issue now. And I believe that our seniors understand this. And I believe that if we can continue to give them this message, that we are in no way wanting to harm the benefit that they're receiving now or the benefit that they will be receiving if you're 55 and older, we will be able to accomplish that. But again, the calls that are coming into my office, that I am more than willing and my staff is more than willing to answer these issues, need to be going on to the Senate. They need to be going to the Senate and asking why these issues are not being brought up. Why are we not voting on these bills? Why are we not passing a budget? You've heard my colleagues say it's been over 900 days since the Senate has passed a budget. There is no household that can function without a budget, and there is absolutely no business which cannot function without a budget. Our seniors understand that too, because they have lived very responsible lives and deserve all of the benefits that we should be providing for them. So thank you again for holding this very important special order, and to those seniors out there, we are working very hard for you, and we will continue to do so. Thank you.
Absolutely, and I know that you would agree it's a privilege to talk about our seniors tonight, and your background in health care certainly lends a lot of expertise to this issue. And now I have another friend who's another colleague from the same great state of North Carolina, and I think it's interesting. I learned something here, Virginia, that you're from grandfather community. Is that correct? And we're talking about seniors, so it's appropriate. My good friend, Representative Virginia Fox.
Well, thank you very much. I want to thank our colleague from Missouri, Congresswoman Hartzler, for leading this important effort tonight to highlight the concern that Republican women have for the millions of seniors that we represent in Congress. And yes, I do come from a little community,
in western North Carolina that's called Grandfather Community, because there is a mountain there called Grandfather Mountain that's it's one of the highest mountains east of the Rockies. It's the second highest mountain east of the Rockies. And I have to tell you, when people come and see the beautiful view I have and say, how can you leave this to go to Washington? And I tell them, it isn't easy, but I think that we're doing important work here, and it's important that we continue to do this work and represent, I think, the majority of the people in this country. We know, though, and I think highlighting this is very important, and it's interesting, my colleague from North Carolina who just spoke, Congresswoman Elmers, and I did not exchange notes, but we both were on the same wavelength in terms of what we wanted to talk about. I read my own mail, I answer all my own letters, and I'm astounded at the number of letters I get from seniors who tell me they're very concerned about the health of the Medicare and Social Security programs. They are concerned, and they've been misled into thinking that Republicans want to do something negative to those programs. It is amazing the misinformation that's out there about Republicans and our attitude toward Medicare and Social Security. In fact, it's Republicans who have a plan to save Medicare and Social Security, and that's what I tell seniors. But they've heard that the Congressional Budget Office has projected that Medicare Part A would be bankrupt in 10 years. And they know they've paid into these programs, and they're relying on them to provide critical medical care for them when they need it. But in the past, Congresses have taken a pass on reforming these programs to keep them solvent for both today's seniors as well as for future generations who are currently paying into them like we are. But the House Republican Path to Prosperity budget plan provides a way forward. It ensures that Medicare lives long past 2020, when it's now projected to be bankrupt. The Republican plan, as my colleague from North Carolina said, does nothing to impact Medicare benefits for anyone 55 or older, but it will improve the program so that those 54 and younger will have access to the same kind of health care program enjoyed by federal employees and members of Congress. We're often criticized for having a separate program, but this will allow the seniors to participate in the same kind of program that we participate in. It's far better than letting the program wither on the vine, which is what those who refuse to take action would allow to happen. And again, as my colleague pointed out, it's our friends on the other side of the aisle who voted to cut $500 billion from Medicare. Not a single Republican voted to do that. Our effort has always been to save Medicare, to save Social Security, and we have the plan to do it, the Path to Prosperity budget and its plan to save Medicare. It's the only plan that preserves Medicare for today's seniors and for future generations, and I think this special order will help us get the message out to our constituents and those who are constituents of other members of Congress. And I want to thank you, Congresswoman Hartzler, for putting on this special order tonight.
Sure. Thank you so much, Virginia. Now I'd like to yield time to my another good friend from New York, Anne Marie Burkle.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Speaker, I am so proud to stand here this evening with my fellow Republican female members of Congress, and we stand here tonight united on behalf of our seniors. I come before the House tonight, Mr. Speaker, not only as a nurse and someone who's been involved in health care most of my professional life, but I come here as the daughter of a 90-year-old senior citizen. I rise here tonight to express my appreciation to my mother and to all the other seniors who have made such valuable contributions, both in my district but throughout the United States of America. The seniors of today have fought wars. They've educated us. They've helped to build infrastructure and technology that has led the way to our modern life. today's seniors they're still busy enriching our society. Some of our seniors are busy in the community with caregiving, with volunteering, with sharing important life lessons with their children, with their grandchildren, and with their neighbors. Yet some seniors, Mr. Speaker, in today's economy find themselves working later in life. And when they finally have the ability to retire, they will be dependent on Social Security and Medicare, programs that they have paid into their entire lives. Mr. Speaker, America must honor its obligations to our seniors. We must achieve bipartisan solutions that don't cut our seniors' benefits, but rather ensure continued existence of these programs. I'm so saddened by the calls I get from seniors day in and day out, Mr. Speaker. They call my office, they write letters, and they're so fearful because of the misinformation that they have been given. I want to stand here tonight with my Republican colleagues and ensure our senior citizens we are protecting your back. We are protecting Medicare and Social Security, the programs that you rely on. We want to ensure them they don't have to worry, that we will take care of them. We will honor our commitment to them just as they honored their commitment to the United States of America. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back. Thank you to the gentlewoman from Missouri.
Sure. Thank you, Anne Marie. Now I yield to the woman from Wyoming. We have Cynthia Lummis. Thank you, Representative.
I thank the gentlelady from Missouri. Among the topics we've been discussing tonight is the effects of Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, on Medicare. And one of the things that I believe is the most egregious is that when the $500 billion was taken out of Medicare to fund Obamacare, is that it puts Medicare in a position where access to Medicare becomes a problem, and it becomes a big problem in states like mine, the state of Wyoming, a very rural place. We've got a dearth of physicians. Every time a Medicare patient walks into their offices, that physician is losing money because the doctors are reimbursed at amounts less than the cost to provide the service. And that's happening elsewhere in the country as well, Mr. Speaker. We know from what the former CBO director, Douglas Holtz-Eakin, said at a hearing in July of this year, and I quote, "Today, Medicare coverage no longer guarantees access to care. Seniors enrolled in the Medicare program face barriers to accessing primary care physicians as well as medical and surgical specialists." He cited an example of the clinics that Mayo has in Arizona that are no longer accepting Medicare patients into their primary care facility. This is happening all over my state. I think it happens a lot in rural areas. So the concern that we have of taking money out of Medicare and not using it to fix physician and hospital compensation, and instead taking it to create a whole new program for non-seniors, it was a big mistake, a huge, huge barrier to making sure that seniors and seniors-to-be, such as people in my age group, those of us 55 and older, will know that we have access to Medicare, the Medicare that we've paid into. So I commend my colleagues for having this special order tonight and raising these issues. I want to commend you and thank you for the opportunity to participate as well, and I yield back.
Thank you, Cynthia. Appreciate it. And now my friend from West Virginia, Representative Shelley Moore Capito.
Thank you. I want to thank my colleague for sponsoring this special order, and I know we're running close to being out of time, but this is such an incredibly important topic for us as daughters, as granddaughters, as nieces and sisters. And you know, we spend a lot of time going to senior centers. I do in my district, and I believe, as my colleagues have mentioned tonight, one of the resounding themes of our seniors right now is they're afraid, they're concerned, they're worried. They don't know what the future is going to be because of all the rhetoric surrounding Washington. The statistics that we've heard, a lot of them tonight, some of the ones that I've heard is that on top of more seniors living longer, we're going to have the number of disabled elderly persons is projected to rise by 1/3 by 2030. And as of January 1st, 2011, each day 10,000 baby boomers turn 65. The numbers just aren't going to fit. And we've talked about the Republican plan to reform Medicare, to not touch those benefits of our present seniors, but to reform it for future seniors, for the baby boomers to come that are going to be turning 65 and going to have to need to rely on Medicare. I'd like to talk about something in a personal way. We have a personal story, a lot of us. You know, I'm in the sandwich generation. My parents are both in their 80s, and they're really having a pretty rough spell of bad health. And what it's done for my brother and sister and I is we've had to spend, and we lovingly do this, but spend many, many hours trying to figure out how to meet their health care needs, try to figure out how to pay for all of their obligations, and the worry of talking with doctors, trying to make sure they're comfortable. This is a real worry for all families across the nation. But in our country, 66% of these caregivers are women. And I think that's why we as women of the House, particularly Republican women of the House, wanted to discuss seniors and care. And so with this sandwich generation, with the rising incidence of Alzheimer's, which touches every family, and my family's no exception, it brings a different type of need to this country on how we're going to address these very difficult medical issues. But if we don't address them, and we've heard this tonight, if we don't address them, if we just let them lie, let them stay the way they are right now today, they will not be there. They cannot exist. And one of the ways I think that we can really help our seniors is to have an economic program in place to grow our economy so that their 401ks that they look at monthly, that they rely on for income, are growing rather than just dissipating and shrinking, which is another huge problem for our seniors. Many of our seniors have planned very, very well for their retirement. They've kind of thought of them as their golden years, the times when they're going to be able to travel or visit more with their grandchildren and have the ease of life of the day-to-day obligations being met. And with the downturn in the economy, with the lack of growth in our economy, our seniors aren't able to do that. They put their heads on the pillow at night, and they're concerned about whether they're going to not only meet their obligations for their health care, but the gas, the food, the payment for all of their needs. And so I think we need to realize that we have plans. We have plans for our seniors. We know how important Social Security and Medicare are to our seniors. Maintaining it and making sure it's there for future generations is absolutely critical. So I want to thank my colleague for inviting me here this evening and getting a chance to talk about something I care deeply about, and that is our nation's greatest generation. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you, Shelley. Tonight you have heard from a lot of us, Republican women here in Congress, and you've heard our stories and our love and our respect for senior citizens and our heartfelt desire and commitment to serve and to represent them and to make sure that their rights are protected and that their voice is heard here. You've heard how we have had proactive plans put forth here in the House from our group to address Medicare and to preserve and protect it for the future. You've heard how we care about Social Security, and we're not going to take it away. We want to make sure it is there for future generations. You've heard of our concerns for Alzheimer's and the other diseases that are ravaging our aging population, and our desire and our commitment to move forward and make sure that those are addressed and that we make sure and find a cure there. You've heard of how we are listening to the financial challenges that we are hearing from the seniors in our district and the plans that we put forth to eliminate the estate tax so one generation can pass on their farm or their small business to another generation without the federal government taking the property or taking the farm. And you've heard our commitment to veterans and to those who have sacrificed so much so that we can stay free. And we're going to honor those commitments and those sacrifices. And lastly, you've heard about how our respect for this generation, and we know of their desire to pass on an America to their grandchildren that is just as great and just as promising as the one they grew up in. We are committed to making sure that we rein in our runaway federal spending here. We keep our fiscal house in order as a country, and that promise is alive and well for their grandchildren. We are committed to moving forward as a group, and we thank you for listening. We thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this time, and I yield back.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5, 2011, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Rush, for 30 minutes.
I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to express my outrage and my disappointment at the Oakland, California Police Department, who reacted with brutality to those peacefully protesting. Mr. Speaker, I want to remind our nation's law enforcement authorities all across the land that civil disobedience is as American as American pie. It is the act through which our great nation was conceived. It required great courage to do what they did at the Boston Tea Party. It required great courage for the great American Henry David Thoreau to refuse to go to war against Mexico in 1849, an act that gave birth to the anti-war movement that continues today. The equalities that we as Americans enjoy today are the result of those great, courageous Americans that fought for our liberties, Mr. Speaker. The women's suffrage movement went from 1848 to 1920. Generations of courageous women marched, they fasted, and they were arrested. Finally, in 1920, the 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote. It took more than 7 decades of civil disobedience to achieve the change that they sought. Let's not forget, Mr. Speaker, that the abolition of slavery, the labor movement, and the eradication of child labor, the civil rights movement, and the environmental movement are all used civil disobedience as a powerful and peaceful weapon to change laws and to protect all of our liberties. Members of the Occupy movement now emerge as yet another generation of courageous Americans, voicing a general frustration that many citizens feel with a money-driven elite that mismanaged the American economy. They are challenging us, this Congress, our government, to reform not only Wall Street, but reform a culture of selfishness and greed that has distorted who we are and made the American dream appear unattainable. We're losing ground as a result of these individuals, this grotesque American greedy and avaricious elite. The Occupy movement, Mr. Speaker, embodies a sense of growing disillusionment with the direction of our country. I, for one, understand that feeling. With deadlock, a daily occurrence in this very house, it is hard for the American people not to feel a sense of utter frustration. They see their elected representatives unable to govern at this crucial time. Mr. Speaker, a betrayal of American values occurred last night in Oakland, California, when police fired tear gas on those peaceful demonstrators. It occurred in New York City when police maced and beat protesters. Government violence against our own people? Is this not the very thing that we condemn in other places all around the world? How dare we denounce an action when committed abroad, but yet remain silent when it happens in our own very own, our own backyards? I, for one, cannot remain silent. History teaches us that violent response to civil disobedience never ever works. It makes people angrier. It turns public opinion against law enforcement, against the police. It is counterproductive and never achieves the goals of those who are trying to impose order. Getting arrested is a fundamental part of disobedience, civil disobedience, civil disobedience. The Occupy movement demonstrators, they expected to be arrested. Civil disobedience participants all expect to be arrested. But they should also expect that the police will conduct themselves with a professional understanding and sensitivity of the power that they possess and the government that they represent. They carry weapons, and they have the power to maim, to kill, to wound, and to arrest. With that great power comes great and even greater responsibility. And that greater responsibility includes the freedoms that were promised to all American citizens in that great document, the preamble to the Constitution in the Bill of Rights. The freedom from, and I quote, unreasonable searches and seizures as promised in the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. The freedom from, and I quote again, cruel and unreasonable and unusual punishments as, and I end the quote, as promised in the Eighth Amendment. And finally, Mr. Speaker, and perhaps most importantly, the freedom enshrined in the First Amendment, which guarantees, and I quote, the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of their grievances, end of quote. It is the job of law enforcement to uphold these freedoms, uphold our Constitution, uphold justice, even in the midst of the most difficult of situations. Beatings and mace and tear gas against our own people, exercising their constitutional rights, that is unacceptable. unacceptable, and more importantly, it is un-American. I do sympathize with the tough job our nation's police officers face now and have faced, and I can understand why they may feel intimidated by the sheer numbers or mistake the demonstrators their passion for aggression. However, I ask in a humble way, I ask the police officers who are monitoring these protests to act with a rational head, with soberness, with restraint. Violence only breeds violence. Such unwarranted crowd control methods will only serve to create mutual contempt between protesters and the police alike, dividing Americans against Americans, citizens against the police. We don't want that. This is not a nation that supports and encourages that type of activity. It was only last week, Mr. Speaker, that we, this nation, citizens of the greatest country in the history of the world, only last week that we dedicated a memorial to a man who was the embodiment, the living proof of the power of disobedience and nonviolence. Those who march peacefully in the face of fire hoses, in the face of dogs attacking them, police batons striking them all over their body, including their heads. They changed America. Now a new generation follows boldly and audaciously with an American audacity. They follow in the footsteps of those American patriots who dared to disobey the law of the land as a matter of conscience and priority, a matter of consciousness that created this great civil society called the United States of America. They made our nation better back then, and I believe the Occupy movement challenges us to make America better now. Yes, it can be done. America can be better. America must address the issues that those who are now demonstrating peacefully across the land that they are raising. They're only trying to peacefully redress their government. It is their constitutional right. How dare dogs, how dare tear gas, how dare police attack them in the wee hours of the morning. Mr. Speaker, the mayor of Oakland, California, Mayor Jean Quan, owes the Occupy movement a sincere, heartfelt apology. Mayor Quan owes the American people a sincere, heartfelt apology. At 3 a.m. on yesterday, the Oakland police invaded the park where the protesters were assembled. 45 years ago in the same city. 45 years ago this very week, an organization that I became a member of, the Black Panther Party, was founded in Oakland, California, as a result to the police brutality of the Oakland Police Department. 45 years later, I, as a member of this body, a member of this esteemed body, the House of Representatives, I, as a member of this body, am ashamed to bear witness once again to the same Oakland Police Department violating and attacking and brutalizing innocent citizens who are protesting, bringing their deep felt grievances to the forefront and engage in acts of civil disobedience. Police batons, tear gas, mace, no matter what the weapon is, no matter what the strategy is, they cannot kill this movement. They cannot stop this movement. This Occupy movement is going to move forward. It's going to move forward with an accelerated pace because of the actions of the police department in Oakland and in other cities across this nation. They have a right to protest. They have a right to make their voices heard. They have a right to, as called for in the gospel of Jesus Christ, in the Bible, to make their bodies a living sacrifice. These individuals, they are epitomizing the greatness in us all. It's a thing that we celebrate all across the land. We celebrate it in Tunisia. We celebrate it in Egypt. We celebrate it in Libya. We celebrate it in Yemen. We celebrate it in China. We celebrate it in other places all across the world. How can we be so hypocritical? How can we be so insensitive? How can we be so arrogant to celebrate civil disobedience in other places across the world and attack the very same actions and attitude here in our nation when our citizens engage in civil disobedience? Mr. Speaker, I say that those who are involved in the Occupy movement, you are just lighting the first spark in a prairie fire of peaceful demonstrations across this land. Don't give up. Don't give out. And please, don't give in. Godspeed to you. We need you. You're doing the right thing at the right time for the right reasons. Keep doing what you're doing. Stand up for what you believe in. Stand up for what you believe in. It is high time now that the American people stand up for what they believe in and take to the streets to demonstrate to all that we're sick and tired of being sick and tired. We're sick and tired of home foreclosures. We're sick and tired of unemployment. We're sick and tired of being sick and tired, as Fannie Lou Hamer once said. We're just sick and tired. We're sick, yes, of the rising cost of health care. We need to demonstrate and protest the rising cost of health care. We're sick and tired of the rising gap between those who are sitting high on the hog, the wealthy, the elite, and those who are at the bottom. The rising gap between those who are unemployed and underemployed, who are chronically unemployed, and those who are reaping the 1%, who are reaping all the wealth of this nation and telling the rest of us that they have a right to the wealth of the nation, but yet we as American citizens don't have a right to a decent job. We as American citizens don't have a right to decent housing. That we as American citizens don't have a right to decent education. That we as American citizens don't have a right to decent health care. How can they look down on us and tell us that we don't have a right to the same opportunities and to the same lifestyle and to the same benefits? How can they tell the dwindling, disappearing American middle class that they don't have a right to demonstrate? These are our children, and they want a better future. These are our children, and they're willing to fight for a better future. These are our children, and they have the courage to stand up against the government, to stand up against the elite, to stand for their rights. And I am proud that our children are standing up and standing for something to try to get some meaning into their lives and try to make this nation a better nation. I'm proud of them. And again, I say to them, don't give up. Don't give out. And please, don't give in. Godspeed to you. And Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5, 2011, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gomert, for 30 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate my friend, Mr. Rush. He knows something about struggling for civil rights, and he's done a great deal for civil rights. I respect that very much. As a Christian, it's okay to talk about our religious beliefs, as long as we don't ram it down somebody else's throat, trying to force them to believe as we do. But First Amendment allows our right to discuss that. I'm very grateful for Abraham Lincoln, and as I was just talking with some constituents down in Statuary Hall about John Quincy Adams, believing he was called to try to end slavery in the United States after he was defeated in 1828 for a second term. So he did the unthinkable. After being president, he ran for the House of Representatives. And some thought it was extremely strange, and as I told my constituents, my friends, it was reputed that when someone asked him about that, he said he was prouder of being elected to the House of Representatives after being president than he was being elected president, which seems so strange to some of us until you realize that it means after he was president, his neighbors still liked him. That's a big deal because most presidents don't end up going back to their earliest hometown. They go somewhere else. John Quincy Adams got elected 9 times, preached sermons over and over down the hall about the evils of slavery. We really couldn't expect God to keep blessing America while we were treating our brothers and sisters by putting them in chains and bondage. 17 years he fought that fight, believing he was called to bring an end to slavery. His last year there, there was a young, tall man from Illinois who had been elected to Congress one time. Most people don't know that he was ever elected to anything but president, but Abraham Lincoln was elected. John Quincy Adams liked him, took him under his wing. And it was reported that after Lincoln was defeated after just 2 short years, went back, practiced some law, made some money working, doing some legal work for the railroads and other things. After the Compromise of 1850, he knew he couldn't allow this slavery. It's even more states coming in with slavery. He got back involved and fought the battle. Didn't get elected to the Senate. 1860 got elected president. But it was reported that someone asked him if there was anything memorable that happened in his 2 brief years in the House of Representatives, and that he replied basically that not other than those powerful sermons John Quincy Adams used to preach on the evils of slavery. He knew it was wrong, but it just etched it on his soul. He had to do something. John Quincy Adams died in 1848, not achieving what he had originally thought he was called to do in slavery. But a man who believed in God, who read the Bible constantly, whose second inaugural address is etched in marble on the north inside wall of the Lincoln Memorial. It's one of the greatest theological dissertations on how, if there's a just God, there could be something as horrible as a civil war, brothers killing brothers. As he said, they all read from the same Bible, pray to the same God. The prayers of both could not be answered. The prayers of neither were fully answered. But as Lincoln came to realize, if it is that God chooses to have every drop of blood that was drawn by the master's lash be equaled with blood from a sword, then, as he said, we still must conclude what was concluded 3,000 years ago. And then in quotes from the Old Testament, the judgment of the Lord are just and righteous altogether. Powerful theology of a very difficult subject. But those beliefs drove him to give his life for others. Downstairs, we just saw the statue of Father Damien, a Catholic priest in the Hawaiian Islands that knew, going to the island where the lepers were, where they had no basic life, that eventually he would get leprosy and he would die from it. But he knew he had a calling, that God called him to minister to those lepers so they could have a life, they could have a society, a place to worship, a priest to come to for ministering and consolation, direction. So it is entirely appropriate that despite the existence of the ACLU wanting to tear down so much of what the founders did and the great things that are emblazoned in the soul of this country, the statue, the plaque starts with John 15:13. Greater love hath no one than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Basically, Abraham Lincoln did that. But there was not full equality in this country. That was clear. Bobby Rush can talk about that authoritatively. I really can't. He can talk about it authoritatively. And along came an ordained Christian minister named Martin Luther King, Jr. He believed it was his calling, God's calling on his life, to bring about real equality in America. As he said, he had a dream that one day people would be judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. He had a dream. I'm so grateful for that heritage, that God moved in the hearts and minds of great men like that. Some would say Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave his life to help African Americans, black men and women in America, to have equality. But it goes much deeper than that. For those of us who are Christians, he created an environment where white Christians could finally really be Christian and treat brothers and sisters as brothers and sisters. That's a big deal. Because before that, there were too many white Christians who didn't. He freed them up. Now you can treat your brothers and sisters as true brothers and sisters, where the color of skin doesn't matter. Powerful. But the country we've come to know and love is under attack. We, many of us, I was in the Army at Fort Benning in 1979. We look back and we think, well, the war started, radical Islam started at war against us in 1979. More recently, some who know more about the history of radical Islam say it actually started quite a bit before that. But 79, it became clear. President Carter, well-intending, meaning well, hailed the Ayatollah Khomeini as a man of peace, just like this country did with President Mubarak. We would not assist and, in fact, encouraged rebels, and the leader of a country with whom we had agreements, we reneged on our end. Not that the Shah was a fine, great, upstanding man from reports. I never met him. Apparently he wasn't. Not that Mubarak was a fine, loving, cuddly fellow. Apparently from reports he wasn't. And there wasn't equality as there should have been. But he kept radicals at bay from destroying the peace agreement between Israel and Egypt. We had agreements with him that we, apparently this administration looked the other way, wouldn't honor those agreements. I sure never thought much of Gaddafi, but I could not celebrate a man being captured, tortured, and then shot, and then all the adoration and excitement by the same people who get so upset if a terrorist who is trying to kill Americans has water poured on his face, knowing that the water won't hurt him, that there's a doctor right there, and that when he reveals information, as Khalid Sheikh Mohammed did, it will save lives and lead to the saving of many more lives. But he won't be harmed, we know, because the doctor would have been there if there was any problem. Yet those same people that went ballistic over pouring water on a guy's face, not pleasant. How excited they could be about a man being captured, tortured, and shot in the head routinely. How excited people could be about having a drone take out an American citizen. Well, he had declared war on the United States. You declare war on the United States has every right to declare war on you back. You're an enemy combatant, and the rules of war apply, such as they are. But we have come so far in the last 10 years from being careful and concerned that it seems that we've gotten careless, gotten ridiculous. Our obligation, even those of us who are Christians, is not to turn the other cheek as part of the government, not to reward evil with good as individual Christians are supposed to. Our obligation is to provide for the common defense. Same thing set out in Romans 13. You do evil, be afraid, because the government's not given the sword in vain. We're supposed to encourage good conduct and punish evil. Provide for the defense so that individuals, whether they're Muslim, Christian, Hindu, Scientologist, whatever, they can worship as they wish. But when we fail to protect this nation and provide for the common defense, we're not doing our job. We've had a very interesting time today with Secretary of Homeland Security, Janet Napolitano. There's some things that have come out that have been very deeply troubling to me, and I would hope that they're very troubling to many. I've got numerous polls, things that I've taken out to talk about here today. One is a new segment here about Secretary Napolitano appointing a de-radicalization, that's in quotes, expert, Mohammed Al-Bayari, to the Homeland Security Advisory Council. Now, originally, he was made by Homeland Security a member of the Countering Violent Extremism, which is a little strange. Violent extremism, oh yeah, then you realize that's because this administration does not want to use the terms radical Islam about the people who are radical Islamists. And when you get to digging a little deeper, you find out that the OIC, the Islamic group, years ago figured out we need to go on the attack and start calling anybody who mentions radical Islam as an Islamophobe. Even if it's a lie, it doesn't matter, call them Islamophobes. And they found that if you give universities, even great universities, proud heritage in this country, massive amounts of money, you can also get them to teach seminars on Islamophobia. You can get them to teach courses on Islamophobia. And you can paint the picture that anybody, no matter how open-minded, no matter how well-read, how well-studied they are, you call them Islamophobes enough, then maybe it'll catch on and people will be afraid to call radical Islamists what they are. Now, I don't know of anybody who is in judiciary today that believes that Muslims are terrorists. They're not. The only disagreement among those I know concerned about radical Islam is whether the radical Islamists are 1%, 5%, maybe a little more. Some might say as much as 10%, but at least 90%, maybe 99% of Muslims are peace-loving people. And if you got a Muslim friend, they are your true friend. And people have experienced that, they've seen that. But those who study radical Islam also come to know that it's very difficult for a moderate, peace-loving Muslim to speak up against radicals, because under some of the contorted thinking by people like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, that helped plan 9/11, that basically makes them an apostate. They're not really Muslim. They're Muslim in name only. They think that means they're okay to be killed because they don't really believe in true Islam. So when you get down to it, it appears, from a studied look at the issue, when you don't worry about what the OIC or Muslim Brotherhood may try to paint you as, or the mainstream media, for whatever reason, though so many of them in the mainstream media would be some of the first ones killed if radical Islam takes over this country, they nonetheless do some of their bidding for them without realizing just how ignorant they're being. But if they were to take over any area where they take over, as they did in Afghanistan, the moderate, peace-loving Muslims are often the first ones brutalized and killed because they don't see them as true Muslims because they're not radical like that small percentage. But documents have been discovered going backward to the 1993 meeting in Philadelphia of those who would be part of the Muslim Brotherhood, other groups trying to plot a strategy for the years ahead. They believed a number of things that we're now seeing carried out. You intimidate people, you make them think they're much more intellectually elite. If they say, well, gee, we're not going to even say the name of radical Islam. In fact, as Speaker Pelosi led in the last Congress, the 2006 military tribunal bill was changed, the law was changed, so we didn't call them enemy combatants anymore. We called it, changed the name, big deal, changed the name from enemy combatants to unprivileged, alien, enemy belligerents. And I guess we just hope that the word enemy wouldn't offend them, even though they've shown, as they did with Mr. Pearl, they will take a jagged knife and cut your head off. They don't do it in the name of Scientology. They don't do it in the name of the Southern Baptist Convention. And if they did, I would be calling them out for doing so. They do it in the name of a perverted form that they believe is Islam, but it's radicalized jihadist Islam. So, here's an article. October 21st, 2010, Secretary Napolitano appoints Islamist to Homeland Security panel. Well, it turns out Mohammed al-Bari had been appointed to her Countering Violent Extremism working group, and apparently it impressed somebody to the point that a year ago, October 21st of 2010, Secretary Napolitano swore him in as being part of the Homeland Security Advisory Council. As we found out today from Secretary Napolitano, he was also given a secret security clearance. We've also seen from other articles we've talked about here before that the White House, and as we found out today, Homeland Security has implicit trust of the President of the Islamic Society of North America, ISNA, even though ISNA was found to be a named co-conspirator in funding terrorism in the Holy Land Foundation trial. Now, CARE, same way, named co-conspirator in the Holy Land Foundation trial. The original prosecutor's thoughts were, the Bush administration, those I've talked to, intended do everything they could to get convictions because they saw, they had the documentation that these groups were doing some charity work and actually doing some, but then sending money, really, the basis of their group, send money to Hamas to fund terrorism. And that's what they were convicted of, 105 counts as I recall. There was a move by CARE, some of the not defendants, but named co-conspirators, to have their names struck from the pleadings so that people would not see that they were named co-conspirators. But both the judge at the trial court and the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals found there was sufficient evidence to show that they were co-conspirators in funding terrorism, and therefore they did not, as a Fifth Circuit rule, they weren't going to have their names removed. The evidence was there, and in fact, got some of it here. Now, there were boxes and boxes and boxes of documents that have these kind of checks and ledgers and deposit slips and things like that that make a clear case that these groups ended up providing money that funded terrorism. But this Department of Justice, headed by Attorney General Holder, decided not to pursue all of these other named co-conspirators. They let the cases drop. And not only would they not pursue them, they ended up, actually, we have the president of ISNA, who we find in the comments that have been on the White House website, actually led the iftar prayers a year ago at the White House, and actually have a very nice relationship from what the Deputy National Security Advisor said with the National Security Administration, the National Security Advisor, and the President. We found out from one article that all it took was with 2 individuals who were going to participate in training law enforcement at one of our intelligence services. All it took was CARE reporting, calling the White House, reporting to the White House that people were going to say bad things about radical Islam, and that people that wanted to kill us were radical Islamists, and explain how you could look for people who were radicalized, look for telltale signs. The White House, according to one article, intervened, and we know for sure the conference was canceled immediately before the conference was to start. And we have an article indicating that actually now they're rewriting the rules so that if you are a government employee, you will not be able to do briefings on the threats of radical Islam, and also they will not pay for outside contractors who've spent their adult lives studying the issue, so that it will be left to volunteers like those from the Muslim Brotherhood who will come brief our intelligence, our State Department, our Justice Department, and the White House on issues to do with violent extremism. And then we find out more about this person. I'm told he's a very nice gentleman, Mohammed El-Biyari, that he's done a lot of nice things. But you don't have to look very far. You find out he was one of the featured speakers for the tribute. In fact, there's a flyer, a tribute to the great Islamic visionary, the Ayatollah Khomeini, who has done more to bring hate and war and death and torture into the modern age than most anybody in the last 40 years. And he's a named presenter in the tribute to the great Islamic visionary. And then we find out not only did he speak at that, but also he's written articles. He got after the administration for the prosecution of the Holy Land Foundation, thought the trial was unfair and unjust, uncalled for. He also speaks glowingly of Qatbi, who is the Muslim who was executed in Egypt in the 1960s after being convicted or found to have conspired to kill the leader of Egypt. But he has many writings, and well, he's held in high esteem not only as a basis for Osama bin Laden feeling that he should be a barbaric killer and destroyer, but also for Mr. Eli Biari. And so we have an article he wrote about the verdict misrepresenting the situation with the Holy Land Foundation. And we have an article from the Dallas Morning News where they go through and cite so many of these things that seem to indicate we should be very careful about giving Mr. Eli Biari access to secrets. But he's been given by this Homeland Security group secret clearance. Then this interesting article from May of 2007, the OIC, Organization of Islamic Conference, has said, they reported in 2007, their words, that Islamophobia is the worst form of terrorism, and in fact, that means it's worse than flying commercial airliners into high-rise office buildings, worse than beheading preteen Christian girls on their way to school, worse than launching attacks from civilian areas in order to use retaliatory actions to score propaganda points. Yeah, worse than that is to be an Islamophobe. Then we find out that the ACLU and the Islamists are joining hands, and I found out yesterday that actually Mr. Eli Biari is working with the ACLU, but he's got a secret security clearance so he can work from the inside and from the outside, working with the ACLU to try to get documentation that will ultimately, if he gets it, and this administration may just do this, it will reveal sources and methods of how we are dealing with radical Islam or violent extremism, and he's working with these guys. But the ACLU and the Islamists are going after the FBI and trying to destroy their ability to actually fight those who want to destroy our country. There's an interesting article by Bill Gertz, October 5th of this year, and he points out that the anti-terror trainers were blocked, and according to people close to the conference I mentioned a while ago, the event was ordered postponed after Muslim advocacy groups contacted the Department of Homeland Security and the White House, including scheduled speakers Stephen Coughlin, Steve Emerson, both specialists on the Islamic terror threat. Mr. Coughlin, a former Pentagon Joint Staff Analyst, is one of the most knowledgeable counterterrorism experts, specializing in the relationship between Islamic law and terrorism. Mr. Emerson, head of the Investigative Project on Terrorism, is a leading expert on Islamic violent extremism, financing, and operations. But anyway, looks like they're rewriting those rules, so people like that, since they're not Muslim Brotherhood, will not be able to instruct law enforcement on the threat that radical Islam creates for the country. And then we find that an article here, Holder firmly committed to eliminating anti-Muslim training. But just so people understand, and I'll close with this, I understand that the vast majority of Muslims are dear, wonderful people, peace-loving people. But the radical Islamists, like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and the other four in Guantanamo Bay, who said they wanted to plead guilty in December of '08, the judge was going to accept it until this Justice Department rushed in and said, no, 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 we'll give you a show trial in New York City, and threw a bunch of gum in the works. So now there's still been no trial, there's still been no justice. And in his own writing, he says, in quotes from the Quran, "We fight you with Almighty God. So if our act of jihad and our fighting with you caused fear and terror, then many thanks to God, because it is Him that has thrown fear into your hearts, which resulted in your infidelity, paganism, and your statement that God had a son, and your Trinity beliefs." Then he quotes from the Quran, "Soon shall we cast terror into the hearts of unbelievers, for that they join companies with Allah, for which He has sent no authority. The place will be fire, and evil is the home of wrongdoers." People like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed are radical Islamists, and we need to recognize it so that we can perpetuate the freedom that we've had for 200 more years. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.